How's it going? Good. It's an awesome time just to be part of, to be in worship and just to honor our God. Like Brandon said, we're moving into this Brave series has all been a stretch for all of us. And if you haven't been with us, what we've done here is not only are we having a experience on Sundays where we're going through some of the key areas of how we can be brave in our lives, but to accompany this journey, this adventure that we're on, we actually have an app that you can download, and it gives every day there's individual work, or you can just do it all in once. Some people like to do it all in once. I'm one of those people. The first couple weeks took about 15 minutes like total per week to do, so you can kind of sit through it and just like go right through it. And then in your connect groups, the app actually guides the experience and guides the conversation, and we've had some really awesome conversations in our connect groups circled around this brave experience, and I think it's stretching for all of us. Just as a word of caution, this week your brave experience in your app is going to take a little bit longer than those 15 minutes. I don't know if you've already moved ahead or not, but it will take a little bit longer than that, just to kind of give you a heads up. But first, week one, we talked about getting your heading. We have to know where we're going in order to be able to kind of put out and go into the new. Bravery fuels the new, and it also brings breakthrough. But we have to kind of we have to know where we're going. We have to get our heading. Last week we talked about identifying your storm. Everything good encounters resistance. Everything. When we want to move into something good and something great and something new in our lives, it's going to encounter resistance. How are we going to fight through that storm? How are we going to respond? Are we going to run away? Or are we going to fight through the storm? When God, when something is happening to you, God wants to do something in you. And so we really encourage everybody to fight through their personal storms. What is your storm? What is that thing that's really not, that's the barrier, that thing that stands in between you and that place you're going to? Remember, the storm was synonymous. It was a metaphor, but also it was synonymous for chaos, even for evil. That barrier between you and what God has for you. And so, what is your storm? It's always better when you know what you're facing, rather than when you're trying to face something you have no idea that's about to pop up. Today, we're going to talk about tapping into God's identity of you. Tapping into God's identity. That's why we sing songs like, I know who I am, I'm yours, God, I'm accepted, I'm forgiven, because a lot of times in our lives, we've been told that we aren't accepted, or that, I'm upset with you, or you're a disappointment, or you're whatever. And so what does God really say? We want to tap into that God identity of who we are. Know who we are, not how the world sees you, or how your friends see you, or how your exes see you, because they don't see you very well at all, right? But how does God see you? And so we really want to talk a little bit about who we are. And our name is our core identity. That's kind of why we wanted to play that I know you game with Jen, right? What is your nickname? Because nicknames kind of hold some weight. Sometimes nicknames are just nicknames. They're just meant to have fun, right? They don't really have any significant meaning, but maybe they're meaningful to you. And sometimes they're just nicknames to have fun. Like, we call Brandon B-Dubs, or we call Isaiah on the drums Izzy. I used to call Josh on our soundboard, I used to call him Sweater Vest. It's just like sometimes these things are fun, right? Just because they're just fun. But sometimes they have meaning. Sometimes they're negative names. And there's all kinds of unfortunate names kind of given to people, right? Parents nowadays, they get creative. Let's just say that. Parents get creative. And I found a few. I just wanted to share them with you real quick. This young lady is named Filet Mignon. Yeah, it's right there at the top. That's her e-card, which I thought was interesting. We got a guy who went by the name. His parents gave him the name Batman, but his last name was Superman. So it kind of worked out. Batman been Superman. We have a guy named Jedi Knight. That's a cool name. That's a cool name. You can't even see that. That's a little kid. Jedi Knight. And then the last one, there was a guy, and this might be indicative. This guy, his name was Bud Light. Right? Bud Light, man. Could you just imagine him being on the news? Hey, my name's Bud Light. Sure it is. People give unfortunate names sometimes to their kids. But like Bud probably wasn't his real name. I don't know. Maybe it was a nickname. But our nicknames, sometimes they don't have meaning. But what I find interesting in Scripture is that God and even Jesus had a almost like it was their job. They changed people's names. They kind of changed their names to fit the identity that they saw them as, in moving forward, not the identity that they had. Some of us, we've been given a name, and our name can help us be brave, or it can stifle us from being brave. But Jesus, he did something. He renamed a couple people, but he did this in John chapter 1. In the book of John, John was an apostle, a disciple of Jesus, and he said this: Andrew brought Peter to Jesus. We don't know him. We know him as Peter, but it says this in 142. Andrew brought him to Jesus, him being Peter. Jesus looked at him and said, "You are Simon, son of John. You shall be called Cephas," which is called Peter, which means Peter. So it's kind of this idea like, hey, your name is Simon. Nah, I'm going to call you Peter. And it really kind of, this transformation, this twist on this idea that from a kind of this physically imposing guy, Peter was a physically imposing guy, to this spiritually imposing guy. This is going to be Peter. This is the rock, right? This is something that I'm changing your name because I see something in you that you don't even see, that hasn't been projected on you yet. But I see something in you that's potential in you, and you need to have a new identity. God did this in the Old Testament. He changed Abram's name to Abraham. He changed Jacob's name to Israel. We see this over and over time. Jesus loves nicknames too. Nicknames can work. They can have meaning. He called James and John, whose dad was kind of had this great fishing business. He called them sons of thunder. He called them sons of thunder because they were driven guys who had kind of this big fire, this big drive in their belly that and their stereotypical Jewish mother, petitions Jesus to have them sit on his left and right for eternity, right? And so this sons of thunder, man, they're driven, they're on fire, they're moving forward, they're like causing a bunch of ruckus. Sons of thunder. Jesus loved nicknames. The Bible calls, Jesus called other people other things. James, the lesser, not because he was, he was less important, but because he was smaller. It's like almost like Little John, that idea. So we've all been given a name, and our identity, kind of our core identity, is a name. If I walked up to you and said, who are you? You'd give me your name, right? Probably, we'd probably ask it an easier way than that, probably a nicer way than that. Who are you? I'm Jason, right? That's like our go-to answer. That's our identity. That's kind of how we identify ourselves. But sometimes we're given nicknames. Our identity drives our productivity. That's another thing. We're all concerned with this branding of ourselves and this kind of nickname, and these things that I had a nickname growing up. My nickname was two nicknames. One was Juice, not because I did steroids, but because I don't know why, really. I really don't know why. But the other one, I think it's related. The other one was called Lightning. And I don't know if you can tell, but I'm a pretty athletic dude. And when I was a kid, I ran really, really fast. Really, really fast. So I think Juice was because I was really hyper, and I think Lightning was because I was really fast, which might have been I was hyper too. But anyways, I felt like it was because I was fast. Maybe that was something that the coaches told me, just to say, hey, yeah, that means you're fast. Now go sit down. Get on my face. Our identity drives our productivity. New and improved versions don't really produce the punch that we really need. We love it. I love when new things come out, or like when improved things come out. But what really kind of gets us is things that are in a new category, right? There has been so much just whatever over this Apple Watch that is just crazy, right? I didn't even know that there was a $10,000 version of the Apple Watch until a couple weeks ago. I was like, what? If anybody gave me $10,000, guess what I'm not buying? A watch, right? It's just, but the excitement over this idea is this new category, this wearable technology. It's everywhere, and it's becoming something that's new, and it's really driving things. My old identity was enforced on me from my upbringing, and it might have been something that I felt was enforced on me or was projected on me by my parents, or it might have been something that I felt they were projecting that they really weren't. Have you ever been there? Like, you may have somebody that projected something on you. You thought their expectations of you were something that maybe they were higher than what their actual expectations were of you. And so maybe I'm not gonna say which one it is, but my identity growing up, or my identity as I was kind of getting older and as I was going through school, was it was that I wasn't great all the time. If I wasn't great all the time, if I wasn't perfect, then my parents wouldn't really like me. They wouldn't have that approval of me, or even God wouldn't have that approval of me. So I had almost a perfectionist mentality, or that identity, like he's got to do everything, he's got to do it well, he's got to do it great, he's got to do it perfect. And so I was busy all the time. And so when you receive your identity with God, and when you realize that God never calls you to be busy, He calls you to be fruitful, but not necessarily busy. Busyness is not some amplified thing in the Bible, like, you need to be, plugging away. Yeah, you need to be fruitful. You need to be doing things in your life that matters. It doesn't mean that you got to be churning everything all the time. And it definitely doesn't mean that you need to be perfect. When God says, you are who I want you to be. Be you. Don't strive to be something other. Cities have identities. Have you ever noticed this? Cities have identities that cities kind of attract ambitious people. They have identities of their own. You can sense it when you walk around a city. In kind of 100 different subtle ways, the city sends you a message that you could do more, or you could try harder. Or, the surprising thing is that how different these messages can be. For instance, like in New York tells you above all that you need to make more money. You got to just kind of work, where you got to get up on their money. And there are other messages too, of course, but that's like the driving one. You should be hipper. You should be better looking. But the clearest message there is that you need to be richer. LA, you got to be famous. You got to be connected. You got to know people. In DC's, you got to know important people. In Oxford, we'll go across the pond a little bit. You should do something that you should impact. You should be smarter. In Silicon Valley is that you should impact your world. You should be inventing things. You should be doing new things. In Denver, it's that you should do what you want to do. People are probably like, man, I got to move to Denver. I can do what I want to do. That's expected of me. Sweet. I fit right in. Pittsburgh is really known for hard work, right? Cincinnati, that's where I'm from. We are conservative and probably safety-minded. Let's put it that way. That's probably the best word to describe Cincinnati. Is like they want to be safe about everything. It's a very conservative town. St. Louis, what would you say St. Louis is? What is it? Barbecue. Come on, man. Have you? St. Louis, I think of St. Louis as so far like, show me, prove it. There's tradition here, right? There's a lot of tradition here. I think there's a lot. You got to be entrenched in what's going on here. You got to be and I think that manifests itself in a lot of different ways, right? The whole question of what high school you went to means that you need to be from here. There's tradition here. Like you need to be connected to what's going on. Baseball, tradition, right? Show it to me. Prove it to me. I'm not going to inherently just like throw everything your way, but I want to be in a relationship with you, but you got to show me that you're in where we're at. And so this is interesting. That cities actually attract ambitious people, but they have their own kind of identities as we kind of go around. And when we started One Church, I had pastors and other leaders from St. Louis and from around the country. I say, man, St. Louis is a hard place. St. Louis, I just don't know if it's possible really to launch something in St. Louis, to really be effective in St. Louis. And us going against that identity, saying, you know what, God's called us to St. Louis to do something. We got to do it. Doesn't really matter. We're going to go. Us going against the identity of the city is what has led to and what will lead to everything that's happening at One Church, to our growth and to the blessings that are happening in and through all of you. You must go against the identity that you have been wearing that isn't of God. That's really the key. You got to go against that identity that you have been wearing that isn't of God. Like I said before, we all have names, and our names can lead us to bravery, or our names can stifle our bravery. And even where I am, even where, I don't really get to play it safe. Risk is a part of everyday life for me. And that's what this Brave series is all about. The next steps for One Church, that's a brave step. There's some exciting things on the horizon. There are challenges to start, and there are challenges to sustain. And then there's anxiety, and there's anticipation, and there's excitement, and there's every step of the way. It's no different from what you're going through and what is happening in your life. In the book of Matthew, Jesus was talking to his disciples, and he asked them a question. He said it this way. Now, in verse 13 of chapter 16, it says, "Now when Jesus came to the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, 'Who do people say that the Son of Man is?'" Talking about himself. "And they said, 'Simon, some say you're John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others say Jeremiah or one of the prophets.' And he said to them, 'But who do you say that I am?'" Which is a kind of interesting question, right? What do other people say that I am? I'm interested in that. That tells me something. But who do you say that I am? And it's interesting that their response is different. It's not John the Baptist. It's not Elijah. It's not Jeremiah or one of the prophets. They said, you are the. Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter. And on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." It's interesting that Jesus even models for his disciples that says, you know what? It's what people say about you. You should listen to that to some degree, but you should not identify with that. Identify with who I say you are. He's asking the disciples, "Who do you think I am?" And they give this just really this profound answer. Simon Peter just goes out on a limb, right? This newfound boldness or strength or whatever. And he's like, "You are the Christ. You're the Son of the living God." And just like, you know what? You're right, but there's no way you knew that. The only way you got that is because God revealed it to you. What starts out as a kind of a physical thing, Jesus turns into a spiritual thing. He says that you aren't just strong physically, Peter, Simon. You are strong spiritually. God reveals things to you, and you boldly proclaim them. And this confession made by other brave people will be the cornerstone statement that I will use to build my church. This is what Jesus said, that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. That's the cornerstone statement that God is going to use to build his church. There's other times that we see that Jesus kind of goes back and forth between these different names for Peter. And this is interesting. We can kind of take a look at this to kind of say, when he's called Simon and when he's called Peter, and when he's kind of called in between. Because sometimes we can fluctuate, can't we? Between our identity, like our new identity, and like our old identity. Like we kind of go back, retract back to like our old like lifestyle, our old ways, or like, oh, that's just juice. He's hyper again, right? It's just so Jesus says this when in the Garden of Gethsemane he goes up to Peter, right? And he said to Peter, "Simon, you're asleep." Why would he call him Simon there, right? Because he's not spiritually strong at that moment, right? Like Simon, you're asleep. Could you not watch 1 hour? Watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. It's interesting that he calls him there. And then, later on in that story, Peter said to him, "Lord, I'm ready to go with you to prison and to death." But Jesus said, "I tell you, Peter, the rooster will not crow this day until you deny me 3 times that you don't know me." It's this boldness that Peter kind of goes out in. And when he's bold and he's strong and he's like full of faith, he's Peter. When he's kind of like shrinking back and he's just like not sure of himself and he's kind of like, I'm not really sure about this, he's Simon. It's this idea that Jesus gave him this name, like walk in this identity I have for you, Peter. If you just walk in it, you're going to be spiritual. You're going to be a spiritual force. But it's up to you. We have the same thing in our lives. We can walk in our identity, the identity that's been projected upon us, or we can walk in the identity that God has of us. My identity is that I'm a son of God. I'm loved by Him. And He's enlisted me in His business. In His business, and part of my responsibility is to be a builder. To be a builder of His church. It's kind of take my heading of broadening my spiritual influence out, and be a builder of His church. Jesus called Peter away from his family business of fishing into his family business of building. See, the world is defining you differently than God defines you. The world defines you differently than God defines you. And that is one of the reasons why we aren't as brave as he wants us to be. The world defines us differently than what God defines us as. And that's one of the key reasons why we're not as brave as he wants us to be, because we keep falling back. We keep shrinking back to, I'm just this. I've been told all my life that I'm not good at anything, or I don't feel accepted. I don't feel like I belong. I'm a loser. I'm not forgiven. I'm just not, whatever that is. Maybe you were told something over and over and over and over again, and it began to sink into your life and into your brain, where you're like, this is what I am. I identify with this. And part of our leading out into bravery is to say, you know what, I'm going to leave that behind. I'm going to not even go back and shrink back to that identity. I'm going to move ahead into what I believe God is calling for me, what God's identity of me is. There's an interesting story in the Old Testament, in the book of Daniel. Daniel was a prophet. You may know him as kind of Daniel in the lion's den kind of stories. But Daniel was a prophet. He went through really hard times. In fact, Israel was in exile in a city called Babylon, a nation called Babylon, and whenever you're in exile, that's probably not the easiest time of your life. And so he was kind of spent most of his life in this exile time, and it says this in the book that he wrote in chapter 1. It says, this is kind of giving background story because how names have been changed and what significance that they make. It says this: they were educated for 3 years, and at the end of that time, they were to stand before the king. It's the king of Babylon. And among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah of the tribe of Judah. And the chief of the eunuchs gave them these names. Daniel he called Belteshazzar, Hananiah he called Shadrach, Mishael he called Meshach, and Azariah he called Abednego. Right? It seems like just kind of surface, kind of like just filler text, right? Filler words. There's not filler words kind of fill the page, like sort of like a filler word. After certain things it means nothing, but after certain things sort of means everything. Like after you're going to live, or it's a boy, or like things like that. Sort of means a lot, right? But just like this, it's these filler texts mean so much more than what it really says. Look at this. Daniel's name meant God is my judge. Daniel means God is my judge. But his name was changed to Belteshazzar, which means lady protect the king. Different, right? Different. The world is kind of ruled by this spiritual enemy, and that enemy has been causing gender confusion for years, for a long time. Right? It's not new. It's old. It's been happening for a long time. And our world wants us to fear men and the opinion of others more than God. So it changed Daniel's name. God is my judge to this name that means lady protect the king. And it doesn't stop there. Hananiah's name meant God has been gracious. But his name was changed to Shadrach, which means I am fearful of God. A little bit different. Mishael's name was who is what God is. That's kind of a cool name. But his name is changed to Meshach, which meant I am despised, contemptible, and humiliated. And I feel like sometimes we get lumped in these categories, right? I'm fearful. I'm humiliated. I'm contemptible. I'm despised. People place these name tags on us. Azariah, his name meant Yahweh has helped. God has helped. But his name was changed to Abednego, which meant servant of Nebo. A little bit different. And so when we say that our names are our core identity, take a look at that passage again. When we feel like our names are our core identity, all of a sudden their names meant I'm fearful, I'm despised, I'm a servant of this guy, rather than God has been gracious. I'm what God is. God has helped. God is my judge, my protector. We are fascinated with ways to understand ourselves because we really don't know ourselves. We're fascinated with ways that we can kind of learn about ourselves. You know, that's why we take so many of those stinking quizzes on social media, right? Like, which princess am I in? What color am I? What Disney character am I? What spirit animal am I? I gotta find out what 90s, what Friends member I am. So, like, what is that? We take all kinds of like these different quizzes, and we get sucked in too, don't you? You get sucked in. I do like one and I'm done. I'm like, and this says share on Facebook. I'm like, no, I don't want anybody knowing. This is what I did. That's why we do things like the disc profile and Myers-Briggs. That's not a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with using those things as diagnostic tools for team dynamics. But I think the reason that they're so fascinating to us is that we don't really know who we are. We're searching for identity. We're searching for, I've been told this all my life, or if I've experienced this, or I've told myself that I am this all my life. I really want to know, am I right, or are they right? Who am I? Our appearance, our accomplishments, our abilities, our acquisitions, our addictions, kind of the whole thing kind of leads to this kind of passivity because the world is projecting something on us. Your identity will lead to bravery. Your God-given identity far exceeds your perceived capacity. I'm going to read that again. I'm going to say that again. Your God-given identity far exceeds your perceived capacity. It's interesting to know that what God says about who you are supersedes, right, what not only people think that you can do, but what you think you can pull off as well. Your perceived capacity, not only of yourself, but what others have placed on you. Your God-given identity far exceeds that. I said last week that a ship is always safest on shore, but that's not what it's meant for. That's not what it's used for. That was not what it's built for. There's a story in the Gospel of Luke about a woman, and she had this disease for a long time. And it says this: she came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment, him being Jesus, and immediately her discharge of blood ceased. And Jesus said, "Who was it that touched me?" And when all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the crowds surround you and are pressing in on you." Basically saying, it could have been anybody, dude. But Jesus said, "Someone touched me, for I perceive that power has gone out from me." In biblical times, you would have your family crest in the hem of your garment. And you would then take that and press it in clay as a seal of your identity. And the woman is touching this identity, this identity of Jesus. And Peter doesn't understand what Jesus is saying, but what Jesus is saying is that this woman has tapped into my identity, and it is her source of bravery. And many of us are kind of like reaching for God. We want to know these answers. We want to find out these solutions and, the answers to these questions we have. We're reaching for God, but we're not touching God. And we got to tap into God's identity. We got to eliminate the world's identity of us. And the best way that we can do that is through prayer. Because when you tap into God's identity, His power goes out from Him. That's what causes us. That's what enables us and empowers us to be brave and to move forward. We got to be brave. We got to tap into God's identity. We want to go where God wants us to go by logic. We want to get where God wants us to go by logic. But it doesn't work that way. You only get there by faith. This week, in your brave experience, in your kind of your individual challenges, there's something called the brave experience. And we're going to talk about that more in our group time. But you'll see it. It's this little icon of a lighthouse on one of the islands in the Brave app. And it's really a time for you to kind of just spend tapping in to God's identity of you. It's really meant for you to go on this personal journey and really spend some time really seeking, God, seeking, God, who do you say that I am? And prayer and tapping into God's identity that way, is something that really empowers us to be brave. We got to let the perception of ourselves, whether it's of ourselves or whether it's the world on us or whether it's some people in our family or whether it's some whatever, we got to let it die. And letting those things die takes bravery. Takes bravery. Telling the truth takes bravery. Telling the truth about, this is who I think I am. Not just passing it off. Not just saying it's a joke or not just kind of saying, you know what, I'll get around to that someday. But telling the truth takes bravery, not only to other people, but to yourself. And we have to do that. So last week we talked about identifying your storm. And in identifying your storm, maybe it was something like, I found myself that my storm is just unforgiveness. Or maybe my storm, is perfectionism. Or maybe my storm, is fear or guilt or shame or humiliation or condemnation or whatever it is. We've gone by names and nicknames of like loser or best friend or alone or funny guy or disappointment or afraid. And so what I'm going to really ask you to do today, what we're going to do, in our first week of this Brave experience, we talked about burning the ships. And burning the ships is all about saying, you know what, we're not turning back. We're going to move ahead into a brave new place in our lives. So what we're going to do today and what I'm going to ask you to do is just spend a moment taking your boat. If you have a pen or a marker or whatever, writing those names, writing those identities that you are saying, you know what, it's time to let those things die. It's time to let those things go. Whether it's fear or shame or disappointment or unforgiveness or perfectionism or whatever. Maybe you have something in your mind. You've identified your storm. Maybe it's just something, I've projected this on myself or others have projected it on me. You know what? I'm tired of that. I'm ready to move on. And it can be more than one word. You can fill up this whole boat. So I'm just going to take like a couple minutes. Not even that long. We're just going to write down what that word is. Or words. What I'm going to invite you to do, when you get home or you can go out to a pond or whatever, we're going to burn the ships. We're going to let it go. Take a look at this video.
Burn the ships, we don't need them, 'cause we aren't going back the way we came. Burn the ships, 'cause we aren't going back the way we came. The ships, we don't need them where we're going. Oh, we've got roads to take. Ships, oh, we don't need
this week we're going to do that. I just invite you to burn the ships. Say, you know what? I'm not going back. I'm not going back to this thing. I'm ready. I'm ready to move into a brave new world for myself. And it's going to require bravery. And it's going to require others. It's going to require people coming alongside you. That's why connect groups are so important. But tell the truth to yourself. Let the perceptions of yourself, let the old identities, let the things that are just negative on you die, and let what God says about who you are, how you are, a son, a daughter, a friend, accepted, forgiven, secure, alive, all these things that he says that you are, let that thing radiate and permeate in you, and live out that way. And live it out that way. I want to pray for you.